Hey everybody, Jim Benton here, CEO at Chorus.ai, and thanks for joining us today for the kickoff of the weekly briefing. This is a new edition after 47 straight daily briefings, and I am thrilled to be here today with Mike Burton, SVP of Sales and co-founder of Bombora. Hey Mike, how you doing today?
Hey Jim, how are you? Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
This is awesome. So Mike, where are you? Where am I finding you today?
I'm lucky enough to be in Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And we had a long journey to get here. We were displaced out of New York City and have been kind of migrating to different family and friends, but we've made it here to this great place. So I'm a happy guy.
How was the migration?
Well, we were in Denver. My family were in Denver opening up a sales office for Bombora when everything hit. And
Wow.
We were in Pittsburgh with some of my wife's family and made it up here. And now we're at the beach. So it's been great.
And Mike, tell me a little bit about Bombora and just the team that you're in as we jump into the data in just a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, Bombora is a B2B intent data company. So we help sales and marketing teams do better outbound motions and prioritize what they're doing. And we have a kind of a classic direct sales model with a big go-to-market team that I lead. So yeah, some of the stuff we're going to talk about super top of mind for me and has been for the last few months.
Awesome. Well, I'm thrilled to have you here. As we jump into the data, one quick call out for those that are joining. After kicking off the daily briefing back on March 26, we compiled all of the different briefings we had. We had some remarkable people joining us and put together a 30+ page executive summary that you can download. So if you go to Chorus.ai, go to our resources area, you can download this. And it's just an awesome combination of learnings, data, and insights from that period of time. For today, I'm excited that we're going to go deeper on the data, Mike. So we're going to talk about this together, but what the data is telling us about remote work. What are the signals that we're picking up that showcase how companies have adapted? The productivity, is it up, is it down? And then just changes that we're seeing in terms of behavioral leadership. So let's jump in on sort of how companies have adapted. And one of the things that I wanted to get your perspective on is we're hearing so much about companies going all remote or remote until 2021. I'm curious, what's Bombora's perspective? What's your perspective, Mike?
Yeah, I guess I'd describe us as taking a bit of a hybrid approach. So our offices are starting to open and, different offices in different areas. So there's different rules and regulations around how many folks we can have in and the distancing and that type of thing. But we I think our kind of tenet is flexibility. So we know that some of our employees, just logistically, they need an office to work in. Like their home life doesn't lend itself to remote working. So we're definitely not going to go all the way remote. We want the offices to be there and to be an option for people. And then I think we were talking a little bit earlier, I think the pendulum swung to the point where there's this reappreciation for the office and for the connections. I think earlier on in this process, there was a lot of, hey, we don't need an office. I think the knee-jerk reaction was, hey, businesses just keeps going. Maybe offices are going the way of the dodo. And now as we've been at it for 4, 5, 6 months, it's no. It seems like it would be useful and productive to have those organic interactions with people all the time. So I think A, for flexibility, and B, just to maintain connections and interpersonal relationships with people, I still think the office is really important.
It's interesting how it has changed. I think some of us would pay to get out of our homes right now and back into an office. But it is, I think your perspective about the human connections, I'm hearing more about that from my peers. I even started doing a few in-person sort of outdoor brainstorming sessions with key leaders where we say, let's meet in the Presidio and just get some face-to-face time together. So the Yeti, some chairs and see where this goes. One of the other areas I'm curious about is just sort of how, when we look at how companies have adapted, one of the stats that I found interesting when we looked across the data, of course data, was that from January to June, we saw a 58% improvement in audio quality. And that's noticeable. Companies that are investing in getting better headphones and headsets and systems for their employees. What are some of the things that you've seen and that your company is doing to sort of adapt to the work at home environment?
Yeah, I think it hasn't been one size fits all or kind of like one prescription. I just think a lot of different employees have approached us with different needs that they have. And some of it was audio improvement. Some of it was like, hey, I don't have a workstation at my house. So I think the key tenet is just being able to help each individual employee with whatever they need to adapt.
Yeah, I think that's similar to how we've been approaching it. What are the specific needs? And I saw one today that was different, but it was thoughtful. We had a specific need of an international employee with an air conditioner. I mean, just what do we need to do? I think to work in a human way as a team to bring the best out of people and make sure that we can continue in completely unique circumstances. Mike, I was curious about some of the team building. You mentioned before that you've been doing some team building exercises. I know we're all thinking about this. Anything that you've seen that's worked well?
Yeah, we had, I actually have a background in improvisation. And so we brought in somebody that I know for a few different departments in the organization. One is we do these company virtual happy hours. So we had this improv teacher come in and do some exercises there. And then we brought him in for our sales team as well. And it was amazing. I mean, to have the whole team together, albeit virtually, laughing, and also doing productive work was pretty cool. One thing he had some of our salespeople do was this game called Alibi, where he would play a parent and the two salespeople would play siblings who had come home way past curfew, and they'd have to build their lie together.
Oh, geez.
By listening to what the other had said and building on that lie. And then his role was just to keep asking more and more questions. And honestly, you could see everyone on the cameras. Everyone was laughing hysterically. And it's like you just hadn't had that feeling in so long of being with your colleagues and laughing and talking. And it was really cool. I highly recommend it.
Love it. Bringing the laughter back.
Totally.
Well, let's talk about some of the key data. So looking at productivity, it's a key stat we've been looking at. And one of the most updated looks at this. We look at meeting volume, and we look at this since January. We look at this sort of in the shelter in place, and now we're in a new normal of just working from home. I've constantly been impressed that we're only seeing a 6% dip in overall meeting productivity since January, starting to see some of that summer slump kick off. But what are you seeing across your team? What have you been doing to kind of maintain productivity?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the what's cool about this data is you have to ask, there's businesses through this, and our data helps with this. There's businesses through this that are actually thriving because the environment is asking for what they do. And there's probably more businesses that are struggling. So when you look at this data and you see that it's maintained, what's interesting to me is that also assumes that 70% of businesses are probably flat or down. As opposed to really thriving. So the fact that the productivity has stayed flat, I think is a testament that work from home can work. And so for us, it's hard to separate whether we have a product that is more necessary right now, or if we're really good at being productive and work from home. I like to think it's a blend of both.
Mike, on the B2B intent data, I'm sure you're seeing you mentioned that you're seeing an increase in volume there. Tell me a little about the sales cycle. How's the motion changed? Are you seeing some of these incredibly fast cycles that we're hearing about?
Yeah, it's a bit of a barbell, as I'm sure a lot of businesses are. So you'll have one end is, hey, we have more money because we don't have live events to pay for, and your stuff seems like a great way to fill the gap. So here's some money, and that's awesome. But then there's other ones where you go through a really rigorous sales cycle, and it's like a CFO, waves a wand, and it's just they're not going to buy anything, and that's that. So we get a bit of both. I think in the aggregate, things are more, are positive, right? Like there's still anything that's additive to outbound sales right now, I think is being prioritized slightly higher than it would have.
In terms of, I'm curious when we look at time of day, one of the interesting stats that we were looking at is that meetings are starting earlier. So 25% increase in meetings starting before 9 a.m. And these are specifically customer meetings that we're typically looking at, not your internal team meetings. So huge increase in May, June. And then what really is surprising is the percentage of meetings that are being held now after 4 p.m., 121% increase since January. I mean, very material change in how we are working and connecting with people. Does this resonate? How is this changing on your team?
Well, it's funny. I'll kick it back to you mostly because I'm this, I've lived in New York City for almost 20 years, and this data made no sense to me at all. And then I dug into it. It's like, oh yeah, people commute to work. Yeah. I've either had a 7-minute subway ride or I've walked to work. So when I first saw this, I could not get my head around it. So maybe you could give. I think your tip is more relevant than mine.
I'm someone that's had a 45 minutes, so round that up to an hour commute. Commute up to San Francisco, and that means that right now you could start the day an hour earlier and an hour later, and it feels no different. So if you're having meetings at 8:30 before 7:30, it's a little early, but it's not that different. And so I think what you're finding is that people can now meet at 5 or 5:30 and be at the dinner table at 6, minute after a call. And that just didn't happen before. So I think people are doing that. We're also seeing that the days are getting filled with internal meetings. There's more and more of sort of the meeting volume that we've been hearing about. And it might be pushing customers to finding times that are kind of in that commute buffer.
Sure. Yeah, that would make sense.
The other core stat was looking at, in terms of the day of the week, we've seen that Mondays have started to see an increase in terms of numbers of customer-facing meetings that teams are having. But Fridays have significantly, dropped, or a 20% drop. But it's dropping. And I know that you mentioned that you've typically had an outside or more senior sales staff out in the field. How are you seeing this change in your team in terms of when people are meeting and how they're meeting?
Yeah, so the more senior people, they're spending more time on planes, more time in Ubers on the way to meetings, and then more time in front of customers. And so that all kind of goes away, and I think it gets filled in largely by Zoom meetings and by virtual meetings. The Friday thing is interesting. I think it's the Groundhog Day effect, right? So before, you've got this nice variety, and I don't know, I can relate to it if you can too. It's like, it's a great week when you got 2 days out at an event and then a couple of days in the office, and then maybe you work half day from home one day. It's like that variety was really nice. And that's gone. So every day is pretty darn similar. So maybe that's the hypothesis on the Friday data is like, hey, just enough is enough. By Friday, you have to check out early, or you've been on enough Zoom calls, and you can't take it anymore.
I know personally for me, I have started to shift the Friday afternoon Zoom, especially if they're interviews, just a personal data point, but having those late Friday, interviews over Zoom, they just take incredible amount of energy that I've been shifting them now to Mondays and Tuesdays and saying, by the end of the week, I want to use that time differently than, a really intense, Zoom collaboration.
Yeah. The other thing I think I found, which is an interesting one, it used to be, I'd hate a meeting without an agenda, and you want to be super productive in every meeting. But lately I've been finding myself where if I have a couple like half an hour meetings on my calendar a week, where it's like, I'm just talking to somebody that I work with and that I enjoy, I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
No next steps, no action items. Like, we're just kind of talking about the space or the industry or what our strategies are or what's going on or whatever. It's like, I allow for that a lot more now, which has been nice.
I'm hearing that from others. Even on our side, I think with Zoom, you feel a lot of pressure, or just in a collaboration, to have it really structured. And in the in-person meeting I had last week, my joke was that we met for 3 hours. No technology, just a key group of some of the folks brainstorming, wanted to do some long-term thinking, and it was probably the most inefficient 3 hours I've ever had since I've started. It was kind of the joke, yet in reality, it was really material how we got to alignment on a few things, and just being able to drive home and kind of digest some thoughts. And it's had a really significant impact, actually, as we think about planning in a really wonderful way. And it's been an observation of how do you create that free space, that sandwich time where you typically grab someone and say, hey, let's go grab lunch and let's talk about some ideas. how do we get the bigger ideas? How do we unlock those big, bold dots that are sometimes tough to kind of put out on an agenda?
Yeah. No, that's great.
So the last area I want to get your thoughts. We're finding that leaders are having to work differently in this remote environment. One of the key things that is near and dear to our hearts at Chorus on the conversation intelligence side is coaching and how we stay connected to our teams when they're remote. Across our platform, we've seen a really significant uptake in leaders taking more coaching action. So that's reviewing calls, commenting on them, and you can see that it's up 21% since baseline sort of pre March time period. I'm curious, you were sharing some thoughts about how you're staying connected, Mike, to your team, and you mentioned skip level. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've always kind of like a part of how we operate internally is this idea of having one-on-ones with people in all parts of the organization. So some cross-departmental, but also just people that might not work for me directly, who might work for somebody on my team or somebody, somebody at some other part of the organization. And that's been, I found, especially again, in the second half of this thing, more important, right? Where when we're all in the office together, you're in calls together, you're in meetings together, you're overhearing, you're having conversations in the kitchenettes or whatever it is. So you just feel like you kind of know what's going on and you know what the challenges are, and you're having these good organic conversations about what's happening. Whereas now you really need to make a conscious effort to do that. So it could be by listening to more calls and using technologies like yours. And it could be just making sure you're setting up one-on-one time with people that you would have been interacting with that you haven't. I mean, I can think of a few people that don't work for me directly that I used to talk to every day. Literally, I sit across from them. I'd be talking to them every day about what's going on or just joking around. And then I'd be like, I haven't talked to this person in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? I haven't even Slacked them in a week. So I think just setting aside one-on-ones with a broader range of people in your orgs it's worked for me. It at least makes me feel more connected.
I mean, Mike, the theme I'm hearing just from you is about from improv and laughter to joking around, just how to get the fun, how to get the human sort of that lighthearted connection, which is so meaningful back into the mix.
For sure. Yeah, and I think I don't know this, but people want to be, as a leader, it's like you got to listen, and it's hard to listen right now. And the last stat is like literally listening, so that's cool. But also just listening to people on your team and making them feel like, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm understanding a particular challenge, and now we're going to go try to do something about it. It's easy to lose that in this environment.
Yeah, I agree, and just exactly how to get that connection back in the office. One other stat is that we're seeing, and we've been sharing this before, but continuing to see a real increase in leaders getting more involved in calls, both at the executive level, 67% higher than what we were seeing in the beginning of part of the year, 77% increase in directors being more involved. Are you getting pulled more into calls?
I'd say so. Yeah. Now, I don't know if on a percentage basis, it would be interesting. I know that, for all of the reasons that we've talked about, there's more meetings. We talk through why there's a wider range of the day that people have meetings, and we talk through why. So I guess I'd try to parse through, am I getting pulled on to more calls because there's more calls? Or am I proportionally getting pulled on to more calls? And I guess I'm not sure. It does feel like I'm in front of prospects a bit more than I was before.
Is it different? Is this good? Is this something that's going to stick around?
I think so. I hopefully it's helpful. Some salespeople would probably be like, "You messed up my cycle." So hopefully it's helpful. But yeah, I mean, I'd want it to continue. I spend more time probably talking to current customers than I do to prospects, and that's increased as well. And that, I'll never get sick of that because you learn so much that you can apply across product and sales and many other parts of the organization by talking to customers.
I love it. Well, last question for you. What's your thoughts on Q3 2020? What's sort of your outlook for Q3?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully more reconnection. We're starting to stagger people back into the offices. We're in Denver and Reno, Nevada, and New York City, and they're all have some availability right now. And so we can't have everybody just come back at once. And some people don't want to come back yet, and that's cool too. But hopefully, I'd like to see some people face to face in the next 3 months and get our teams face to face in the next 3 months, at least, 50% more than we have been. And that would be a big win.
Yeah, I love it. I think even on our side, you're just still seeing people get more thoughtful about, the sales motions, the new normal, how we just get extremely crisp about what we do and really focused. And I really hope we get more human time as well. I think it'd be a big win for everybody. Well, look, Mike, this has been incredibly fun. A quick shout out to the folks that helped put this together. We'll be doing this next Thursday. So for those that want to join, please register. You can do this on Chorus.ai. You can download the executive briefing that I mentioned. And I just want to say, Mike, appreciate the time and happy summer and hope you have a great 4th of July.
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me. It was great. Appreciate it.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Yep. Bye now.